protecting your corporate intellectual property and data that is sensitive throughout the organization. So how to start off a little bit about us. I'm going to go into what the current challenges and what the sort of pain points are out there, and of course be addressing those throughout the session. Discussing Microsoft Information Protection, it's what it can do, its capabilities, and also then of course the methodology behind that. We're going to look at some of the pieces of it in a little bit more detail, like Windows Information Protection. And of course, looking at all the different devices and how it behaves on those that we all use, and some third party. We'll have a look at Adobe, for example, here, and how it's monitored, and looking at the analytics and reporting, and time for Q&A at the end. So with that, I'll hand it to Nick.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. I appreciate that. So welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Nick Seamus on the client relationship team here with Netwoven. So as Steve mentioned, we want to present an overview about how to best protect your most sensitive data with Microsoft Information Protection. We'll cover some of those topics such as securing your email, documents, and other data with proper classification and embedded labels, and how the data should be shared both inside and outside your organization. As a quick note, we'll be recording this event today, so if you're uncomfortable with that, please do disconnect. We will be publishing and distributing the recording after the event. So I want to provide you with some background on Netwoven as well. And Steve, can you go back one slide, please? Thank you. So you can see a little bit about us. We're founded in 2001, and we have been a Microsoft managed partner since then. This gives you a sense of some of the customers that we've been privileged to work with, as well as some of the locations we maintain with our global delivery model, which allows us to utilize the right delivery approach to get your project delivered right and on time and at a very competitive cost, leveraging both our onshore and offshore delivery centers. We are a fast track ready partner as well. Steve, if you wouldn't mind forwarding. And today we'll be talking about IT security, but we do work across the entire Microsoft portfolio. You can see some of the different areas that we work in here, which is aligned roughly with 3 Microsoft clouds of Office 365, Azure, and Dynamics 365. We do offer a wide variety of consulting and project services, as well as staffing services and some additional products as well, such as Government 365, which does provide some security compliance features for Office 365 as well. If you could advance, Steve, thank you. Now, while we're talking about information protection specifically today, we do work across many different areas in security and compliance, specifically with the Microsoft platforms and tools. So you can see several of these here. And we won't go into depth about those today, but if you have any further questions on anything you see here, in addition to our talk on information protection today, please do feel free to reach out, and we will have our contact points at the end. So with that overview, I think we should proceed with the talk today. So while we're presenting, please don't be bashful with your questions as we go along. We'll have a Q&A session at the end, and let's turn it over to Steve. Steve, you're on mute.
So I'm sorry about that. All right, sorry guys. So as we're saying, the data that we are dealing with today is such a sprawl. It's on many different platforms, and we're not just saying Microsoft, of course, here. I've got a couple of examples. I've got Box, I've got Google, Salesforce example here. And of course, these are also in many different locations, and people are accessing them on many devices and from absolutely, anywhere. And of course, this has been accelerated really because of the pandemic, because of remote working from home. So this has really pushed this to the forefront, when it comes to decisions within internal IT. So, when we're out in the trenches or in the field, these are some of the things I hear. My information is all over the place, like you've seen in the previous diagram. Now, and how on earth can I apply anything to that when it is in such a sprawl? And so when I have actually found what is sensitive, how can I protect it? And then, as I mentioned as well, talking about all the different devices and the ways and the applications that people use in the modern workplace. And also, you want it to be as automatic as possible. There's nothing worse than manual intervention because you get the human error element there. And of course, you want to set it and forget it in a sense. And so really, this security is all about the balance between productivity and the actual protection. So it has to be a balance, and it's different in every organization. You don't want to turn everything on and then find that your users are very frustrated, help desk is swamped because they can't get to what they want to do to work in their daily lives. And then how do I find it? Meaning, this sensitive or relevant data, I want to know where it is and what's going on. And that's the challenge as well. So if we look at Microsoft Information Protection, it is really sort of an umbrella with many, many different products underneath. But we're going to break it down into these 4 areas: discover, classify, protect, and monitor. And what we mean by that is, okay, we've got to be able to find that sensitive data, see where it is. Once we found it, we've then got to classify it according to our organization's policies that we've set. And then also, of course, provide complete protection for it everywhere. And then I want to know what's going on with it. So we want to be able to look in our dashboards and monitoring and see how that is. And as I said, across many devices, applications, and different cloud services, not just Microsoft again. And also looking back on-premise, that's connected as well. Yeah, we'll cover that. So again, just quickly here to give you an idea, this is a high level for some of the different products and services that come under the Microsoft Information Protection. And again, of course, we're doing our discovery, classifying, we're protecting and monitoring, so that same principle carries throughout. And we're going to go and have a look at some of these in this session. So the interesting thing is when you talk about protecting data, then also governance comes in, because they really go sort of hand in hand. So when we discover and we classify and we label, and this is sort of clubbed together to give us a unified approach, right? So that all of those 3 are together. Then once we've got that, we're going to go ahead and apply the label, and it can be sensitivity label or a retention label, depending on your compliance needs or what you have that you need to protect. And then, that label then is of course applied. And then really there's very, very rich drill down reporting where you can see the whole organization's data protection posture at a glance. And really, it's, talking about the digital estate, which means your information, which is, across that sprawl, you'll be able to see what's going on in one place. And that is just incredible. So how it used to be, and it's, again, this is from a Microsoft perspective, but some other vendors are similar like this. It's a little bit siloed. We've got our Office 365 protection and the Windows Information Protection and Azure Information Protection. And they're all quite separate, the functions, and again, to administer, so not really too ideal. So moving to where it is now. And this is a huge jump because it's all consistent. And that means across these 3 areas with information protection, Windows Information Protection on the Windows 10, and then with also Azure Information Protection. So you don't have to do, multiple steps or repeated steps in each different area. So it's very consistent. And that means really, a faster ramp up for IT teams. And that means also faster deployment because you don't have to do things, 2 or 3 times over. And again, so it's not siloed. So it eliminates a lot of deployment time, but also it eliminates or reduces administration time because it's all together. So a little bit more depth about all of the different pieces in the information protection area. Excuse me. And as you can see here, a couple of the additional ones that weren't in my high-level slide, we've got talking about SharePoint and that Teams as well there, of course, and talking about our remote workers. The Azure Security Center Information Protection, again, this is again focusing on database side, on the SQL side, and other repositories within Azure itself. And really, the SDKs, meaning what the hook-ins are to the third parties and non-Microsoft products, which we'll have a look at some examples there. Right, so we're going to, because these areas are unified, as I mentioned, discovery, classifying, and protect, we're going to look at them together. So let's start off with our on-premise. We're looking at our colo or server room or machines in an office. And so we've got to be able to protect everything there, and that can be the desktop, the server, NASes, database, all sorts. So building on that, of course, as I mentioned, we've got our devices, iPhones, Android, tablets, PCs, Windows 10, of course, and be able to cope with that protection moving through that device, meaning that if it is relevant, the person can access it on any device. If not, it's going to be blocked. And then finally, reinforcing the fact here that it's not just Microsoft Office 365 when it comes to cloud platforms and applications. We're able to hook into many different ones from, as I said, Box, Google Drive, the G Suite, outside of Microsoft, which is really wonderful because not everybody wants to use the same product. We want to be really, really consistent with our automatic classification across these services. So, of course, we've got our Office 365. Now, our classic applications there, Word, Excel, what have you. Really, then the AIP scanner, which is going to cover your on-premise file shares and storage there. And then with the cloud services, we've got Microsoft Cloud App Security is going to take care of that. And then also, within Azure, there's the services there as well. So it's really giving you, across that uniform content discovery and classification, the good thread. So having the administration all in one place. I've walked into so many InfoSec departments or security departments of different organizations, and they proudly announce that they have, 30, 40 different security products, and they're very pleased with that. But let's step back for a second from a technology for a minute. Just looking at common sense, right? You've got 30 or 40 independent products. They all are siloed unless you've done some crazy, API connections between them or something like that. So if there is an issue in one area that security product covers, the rest of the organization's security products have no idea what's going on. So, and that actually is pretty detrimental. It's a case of more is less in this case, because it's going to give you less protection with the more separate services you have. So here we've got all our administration in one place. The classifications, as I mentioned, they're all unified. And that means, of course, it's very consistent across all these, from applications and the third parties as well. Talking about specialized workplaces in Microsoft 365. So on the left here, we've got our security center. And this is really, again, by role-based access. You can provide your security administrators or other people that deal with risk management, for example, with a central area or a central hub, rather, and workspace that enables them to manage and take full advantage of all of the intelligent security solutions that are in there. Access management, threat protection, information protection, and security management. So it's all in one place. Now, when we talk about compliance for a second, on the right there, again, specialized workspace for your compliance area of the business and privacy, let's say risk management areas or departments or professionals. And then here they can get a hold of their compliance risk through Compliance Manager. They can look at how they can protect and how they can sort of govern the data with those sensitivity and retention labels, and really, be able to respond to regulatory requests like data subject requests, for example, and have access to a lot more of other compliance and privacy solutions in there. But again, one-stop shop for those people. So when we talk about labeling, and I've started with Apple because I know people love that, just to mix it up. So here we're looking at Word in Apple, in OS X. So again, consistent for the user. So here we've got, you can see in the top right of the screen, we've got 4 labels in this example. Now, it's different for every organization, and that comes, as part of the analysis and assessment phase when you do the projects in this area. So here they've got public, general, confidential, and highly confidential. You can see this is built into Word in the ribbon. So it's really, it's just a very short learning curve for the end user. Now, of course, change management is critical here because you need to educate the user base on what this means and what this does and the sort of repercussions of that, and have them be responsible about it when they go to setting or changing the labels if the policy allows that. Okay, so now moving on to, you see we've selected highly confidential here. We're still on a Mac, and it's put a red information bar in top of the document, so you really can't miss it. And you can see as well, it's put a watermark in there. So it's letting you know what's going on and that this document is highly confidential. So let's say that, we do allow certain users or someone to change. Let's say it's not had the right label applied, or the level should be higher or lower. So when we try and change that, and if I've got the rights to change that, we can go ahead and the pop-up box puts in and put in the reason. And again, there's a free-form box here that goes in, and that can go through an authorization workflow to the chain of command that can say yes or no on this case, that the label can be changed. Now, of course, not forgetting Excel, beautifully done, exactly the same look and feel as you would find on any machine. And again, we're still on Apple. So we've got our labels in the ribbon bar there. And here, again, it's putting the sort of watermark effect, if you like, with the red information that it is highly confidential. You can't miss it. Let's see now, if we're looking at creating an email, so this is again Mac looking at Outlook, you can see here by selecting the label, it pops in the information bar just below the subject line here. Again, clearly letting you know what it's been set to. And again here, now, this also, of course, does show up in the previews, and it's in the same place. It's always above the message body there. But again, it's clear, but it's not obnoxious, but you can't miss it. So when we talk about Word on iOS, so we're looking at our iPhones here, the same thing. You've got that sensitivity area that drops down. Here we go again with our presentation, our PowerPoint, again on an iPhone. Very straightforward. It's putting the watermark you can see in the slide. So let's talk about email just for a second again on the iPhone. So here you've got add a label. It's all, in the Apple sense, it's all very much flowing with sort of the Apple way of navigation and menus. So again, for an iPhone user, it's super quick to pick up. It's not a complicated learning curve whatsoever. You've selected the label and it's bound to that message, right? And that also, of course, includes the attachments. So here, looking at our lovely Android, same sort of thing. We've got Word up here. We've selected the label. It's put the watermark in. So, and again, if we want to change it, it's got the same structure when it comes to requesting that change. And now with a wonderful Windows 10. So here, part of the ribbon bar again, it's all consistent through every platform, Excel as well, of course. So my point being that it doesn't matter what device you use, what application you use with the Microsoft Suite, it's super easy from an end user perspective to operate and to see what's going on. So let's have a look at SharePoint Online for a minute. So here, you can see my screen here. We're going to go ahead and when we've created a new site, there's a new area here that talks about sensitivity. So just as you've seen it in Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, just as I showed, you again can select from the drop down here which one you want when you're creating the site. So, and that means, and you can see again here, to put the ribbon bar across the top, it's telling the user what the policy is that's been applied to that site. And it's informing and warning them about that. So let's have a look here. So I've got just a test site up in SharePoint. I've got that. I've got a couple of files in there already, and you can see the first file here already has a label. It's got the the employee files label there, but the others have not. So this site's already existing. So what we can do when we go ahead and we go into the document library settings, and we can see here, you see my little pop-up, apply label to items in this list or library. So we're going to go ahead and select that. And of course, we've got the drop down. We're going to see the labels. So what happens is when a label is applied to that library, anything uploaded into it or put into it inherits that label. So again, that's the sort of part of that set and forget type situation that is very, very straightforward because it automatically covers it when items are dropped in there. Okay. So now, if we go back to the same document library, you can see it's applied that label to all of the documents. Very straightforward. All right. So back to our umbrella list of all the pieces. So next, we're going to have a look at Windows Information Protection. And this is focused around Windows 10 but personal machines. So if you're at home or if you have a personal machine you're allowed to do that, BYOD and work, it's able to separate and segregate corporate data from personal data. And the way I sort of think about this is when you think about, let's say, again, with your iPhone, your Android, let's say if you have Intune mobile applications management, which is the principle, not just for Intune, it could be for AirWatch or Mobile Iron as well, which restricts the movement of corporate data off a personal device. For example, it stops you copying and pasting, doing a screenshot. It would stop you, again, depending on what policies you want to set, it can stop you from forwarding so it basically puts a bubble around all of the corporate data on that device, and it never touches anything personal on the phone. So thinking about it, it's a win-win, because you can remember, like, gosh, 5-10 years ago, when you would have the sort of the remote wipe feature with Exchange or Exchange Online, where you could sort of zap the phone if you've left it on a bus and reset it to factory, meaning, delete everything on it. The amount of times I would see help desk people flipping out because their, wedding or baby photos are on the device. So now you can segregate it out and you can surgically remove it afterwards, or if a device is lost. But not only, when we're talking about lost devices, you can think of it in a different way. Because the protection, and we'll get to that a little bit later when we talk about the protection of the file, there's a different way of thinking, which I'll get to shortly. So here, try to copy a confidential file, but I'm trying to put it to my personal OneDrive. It's not going to let me do that. Now, again, in wonderful fashion where it's not just Microsoft, same thing, I'm trying to do it here with Gmail. It won't let me do that. Here, I'm trying to, I'm being really sneaky. I'm trying to get that file onto a USB or a thumb drive. It's not going to let you do that either. Okay. So here, and the screens are very friendly in the sense of it's telling you clearly what's going on. So there's no, cryptic error numbers or what have you with that. So that's a quick look at Windows Information Protection. And again, that's for Windows 10. Now, going back a bit to what you have on premise. So, gosh, most organizations are in the sort of the hybrid state when it comes to on-premise and cloud, with some service in cloud, some on-premise, and they're either happy that way or they're gradually moving everything from on-premise to cloud or as much as they want. So to cover that, the Azure Information Protection Scanner is an on-premise tool that is basically a scan, search and discovery scan engine. And this runs on a schedule, and you point it to, let's say, file shares or wherever else you want it to operate on. And it does the same thing. It's going to go ahead and discover, classify, and label all the items you've got that are in the repository it's scanning on premise. And then, after the initial scans and you've adjusted it, you just set it to run on a schedule. So it'll do almost like you've got a sort of search engine update type situation. It'll do other scans you can schedule to run at night to see any new files or changes in there. So that takes care of all the on-premise files in shares, NAS, all that sort of stuff. Now, when we're looking at the discovery, it's absolutely beautiful. The reports and dashboards are so straightforward. Again, it's for our experiences, it leads to a faster uptake from a customer perspective, and it's just and a shorter learning curve, of course, because it sort of follows the sort of Microsoft intuitive navigation menuing system. You can drill down in these things, so it's not clicking through menus continuously, and you get to look at the state of the organization as a whole. So, if we drill down, you can absolutely drill down to file level to see what's going on. And you can see we've got that here. And we're looking at the files, individual files, where they're located and what's going on with them. And so, for example, this one here, you can see it's picked up a credit card number. excuse me, it's picked up a European debit card, and it tells us who the last person was that modified that file. Okay, so now when it comes to automatically doing these things, and that's what you want, because you just don't want to have to, lose sleep at night worrying if your data is protected. So of course, we can detect the content in the cloud storage, and I've got in big red here that it's so open to non-Microsoft, because I don't think I've been to a client that is pure Microsoft everything, or it's very few. It would be lovely, of course, but it's not necessarily the real world. Let's say, for example, if you have a legal team is a classic in an organization, or a marketing or creative team, they deal with sort of B2B. So in a sense of the legal team has their own law firms, of course, that organization use on retain. Creative departments will have, for example, graphic designers or print shops that they, exchange data with. And so, for example, let's say the creative companies that an organization deals with only has Dropbox. They don't use OneDrive, and they don't intend to use OneDrive. So, we as an organization can now say that's not a problem, because we can connect that in with Microsoft Cloud App Security and have the same level of confidence as if it was not a Microsoft repository. And so here, I've got my examples of Salesforce, Box, Dropbox, and others like that. So that's a wonderful situation to be in, because it's all heterogeneous when it comes to the technologies with this. And then, of course, we can apply the classification labels and protections in these repositories. So here, let me bring up a Box one, and this is fake user Jennifer's logged in here, and you can see there's a confidential document, right? And this is in Box, not a Microsoft product. So moving on to looking from the administration side of Microsoft Cloud App Security, we can trace that same confidential file and get all the information, the detail of what's going on with it, and protect it. So again, removes that complete headache of not having Microsoft do everything for you, or sorry, not using every Microsoft product. So looking at next, let's have a look at from a little bit more on third party, because this is really quite a big thing we find with our clients. And I've taken a classic. Let's look at Adobe or PDFs. So now there is actually native support for PDFs using Adobe Acrobat. So you get the full features in that sense. So Acrobat is going to be able to understand the labels that we've set and really honor them. And of course, that gives us the protection. And we can also view these files, on Windows, of course, and have the confidence again that the right person or the right situation that is protected. And the labeling itself, much like I showed you with Word, Excel, PowerPoint earlier, is actually built into Acrobat. Okie doke. So let's have a look next at, we've done a discover, classify, and protect those pieces together. Let's have a look here at looking at some of the reporting and analytics pieces. So looking at analytics for a moment, and again, we really want this to be, this is really rich when it comes to the discovery, classification, and protection pieces, and the reporting, being able to see your whole, what's called the digital estate in a sense, across your whole organization, and doesn't matter where the data is, what it's on, who's using it, you're going to be able to see that in one place. So here we've got analytics for retention labels within Microsoft M365. We also, of course, have the analytics for Azure Information Protection, and we have M365 analytics when it comes to sensitivity labels, because of course, sensitivity labels and retention labels are two different categories in a sense. So I've grabbed my screen looking at the analytics for labels here. And again, this is the whole organization in this dashboard. So you can see here, they've got like between over 250,000 labels. And we can see the type of label. And here it's breaking it down, of course, between retention and sensitivity. And then where, that data is. And here, they've got majority in SaaS apps, and then closely followed by SharePoint and a little bit in Exchange. And that's wonderful to see, actually, because we're trying to get people to reduce their email, of course, with Teams helping us do that. So it's going to tell us as well, which label do we use the most as an organization? And this is a great tool when you're in the sort of initial deployment periods, or you're in pilot or proof of concept areas with this product. So, because you're going to need to do some tweaking. There's nothing like getting it out there, into pilot or production, then you can see actually what the response is when it comes to labels and any sort of tweaking and adjustment that you can see from these analytics. And then most used, of course, here with sensitivity, we looked at retention at the top and sensitivity here. And then when it comes to actually the application of the labels, it's going to tell us, in here, I'm just looking at the top people who have applied, a total of 320 labels here, and this tells you your employees and what the status is for those labels. And then over time, and so here, we can see that both retention labels, of course, they've been growing across time, which is great because, of course, you're going to have more data over time, and the same with sensitivity. So it's good, if you see, like, let's say these first 3 bars, you can say, well, why did it dip in 327? It can be for some archive cleanse or clear out there, but it's good to see what's going on. Now, there's also enhanced when it comes to the protection analytics. So here, you're going to get a huge jump in visibility when it comes to, again, looking at the labels and where they are and what workload they're on. So again, here, look, we've got absolutely, broken down into all of these different areas when it comes to the sensitivity that we look at here first. We've got, by phone numbers detected, for example, credit cards, at a high confidential level. So it's given us a great breakdown here of what label or what the data is finding that you flagged as important. Now, by application, here, of course, one of the biggest ones, of course, is Microsoft Word, and that's no shocker. And in this organization's example, they've got quite a bit of, legacy file shares and NAS devices on premise. So that takes up another chunk here with the blue. And then, Excel, of course, expect that, and File Explorer and Outlook. So that's quite a typical one of an organization that is in hybrid. So again, this is really great. My point here, recommendations, this is used a lot to fine tune when the products are deployed. Now, labeled items, and this is for actually then the usage. And here, whoops, oh, sorry, I've got this duplicated. Discovery, here we go. So this again is giving us incredible depth about the data itself and what data is at which sensitivity level. So, and here I've got our classifications in the middle, file repositories, and where the actual info is. And again, this is all drill downable, so it's all very, very intuitive, very simple to do. So, looking now, of course, just reminding here, discover, classify, protect, monitor. It's a great methodology, and that's what this follows. And because it's a complete end-to-end solution for your data protection, there's really no other vendor or no other system that's able to do this. Because a lot of the other ones are very siloed, which is really hurtful or harmful when it comes to security and protection. But these all flow. And again, wherever you are, whatever device you're using, whatever sort of application or line of business application you're using, doesn't matter if it's on Azure or Google, for example. And then also, of course, the old way when you're in an office building on premise. So next here, I just wanted to highlight this because persistency is, the key here. And what that means, if I've got, let's say, a Word document or Excel document, I have, it's protected by the, the policies that we've set for that organization. That information of the protection travels with the file. So, towards the beginning, I was chatting about the old days where you would have your mobile phone like zapped or reset by Exchange because you left it on a bus or a train or something, you can't find it, or it was stolen. You can argue here, so if you have got, the files protected, it really doesn't matter. If somebody's stolen your phone, yeah, you've got your personal stuff on it, which that's a whole nother worry, but we as the organization or the company are not concerned with your personal information on the device. That's the whole point. It's separate. But, inside that bubble on that phone, for example, we've got our corporate data, and it's going to ask to validate who, let's say if I try and open that Word file on that device, it's going to ask to validate who I am. So if I don't have, the credentials and the MFA, for example, it's not going to open. So you can argue that you don't have to worry so much about resetting or zapping a phone. You can still do that. You can still, reset the phone like the old days back to factory. You can, of course, if you've got the MAM or the Mobile Applications Management System on it, it will surgically remove the corporate data and leave the phone. So from a organization standpoint, we're confident there because we've got that taken care of. But if it's, let's say if it's just a single file that's been sent or it's on a drive or something, and somebody tries to open it, every single time somebody tries to open that file, it's going to call home. And by that, it means it's going to prompt for you to validate who you are. And again, depending on policies and settings, let's say if it's a login coming from, say if you're an American company and it's a login coming from China, there's a lot of different systems behind the scenes, such as conditional access as well, that's going to flag that and, really say, okay, validate you are who you say you are. That's the key here. So when we talk about a discovery, and then we're going to go big picture-wise here, we've got all these different products when it comes to that deal with that first discovery piece. The classifying piece, again, we've got several products in there, and again, there's even more than this. And when it comes to protecting it and encrypting it, another set, and the monitoring, of course, that we've looked through here. So it is so comprehensive. It's actually pretty damn amazing. So moving on. So here, do go ahead. So I'm going to allow some time for questions if we have them. But here's our contact information, and welcome to get a copy of the deck and let us know how we can help. So Nick, how are we doing with any questions coming up?
We do not have any that have been submitted yet, but we certainly welcome the opportunity to engage. So please don't be bashful. So we'll give it some time to see if
sure.
Yeah.
But of course, with the terrible COVID situation, it's really pushed this to the forefront. Because people have been sent home to work there, and so the clients that we have that have already done this process had no worries at all. It was literally like another day of business, because they're also using Teams heavily, which of course you can do from anywhere. But the companies that were sort of thinking about this or had nothing were scrambling, and still are scrambling actually, to make sure that their data is protected there. So it's definitely worth thinking.
Yeah, it's definitely been an eventful year, and we've seen a significant uptick in interest and activity in regards to security and compliance, as well as topics like Office 365 governance, etc., due to these major disruptions to the workforce and some of the challenges that go along with that.
Right. And Nick, the productivity figures are showing actually higher, right? If I believe, as a whole, when it comes to looking at people working at home, versus everybody back in the office, that they were worried there was going to be a complete dip in productivity. When we look at overall these organizations, but it's actually been a little bit more, which was nice to see.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's been pretty amazing. And, I guess just from another take, I know you and I have had a number of discussions about this, but
Mm-hmm.
no, we're specifically focusing on Microsoft Information Protection here too. But it might
Yeah,
be interesting for the audience for maybe you to comment on the power of utilizing the entire Microsoft Security Suite. What makes it unique about all those different
sure,
parts working
sure.
together?
Yeah, so you know, what makes the Microsoft security, gosh, I don't even know if suite is the right word. I mean, there's so much to it. Is that it's end to end. So when I say end to end, I mean from we're taking care of the devices, the endpoints, if you like, where people are accessing it. We're taking care of the transportation, with encryption, and we're taking care of it at rest, on, let's say, legacy file servers or in cloud services, all the way through. And, depending on your retention or compliance situation, that carries through as well to, gosh, I've forgotten the word, document disposal, but I was forgetting the term for a second. But so it's end to end. It's both from where the document travels end to end and what device, anybody using it anywhere in the world, that's covered. And then, end to end in the lifecycle perspective. Okay, when the document was created, you have the label from there. If it gets changed, or is it morphs the way through? Let's say, okay, we only keep it for 5 years, then it gets disposed of at the end. So it's end to end in both of those tracks, and there is no other solution that does this. So very exciting, because Microsoft takes a totally, it's really, in my opinion, it's a market disruptor when it comes to security, because it's really looking at it in quite a different way, and very successfully, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely, and with that new approach as well, and I guess to kind of use a immune system analogy, given that we're now in a pandemic world, it's no longer relying on just the individual organizational immune system like previous security approaches, right? It's utilizing herd immunity with the cloud and machine learning and AI. And I don't know if you want to expand on that.
You raise a very good point, and and we talk about this in other sessions too. Microsoft as a security provider makes perfect sense, because it's all about metrics and telemetry. It used to be spotty kids in a basement tapping away at a computer, what was it, Sandra Bullock net film or whatever, or war games or something like that. But it's so serious and so intense now that it's AI versus AI, because you physically cannot respond quickly enough when something happens. That's if you've discovered it. We don't, if you don't have one of the Microsoft systems doing that for you. Now, ideal world, when you've got all this in place, and let's say there's a breach or there's a malicious email attachment or something got into the organization, all of these systems work together. So it's going to show you that because of you think about all the logins to Xbox, Hotmail, Azure, Office 365, the AI behind it knows what a regular login or regular user activity looks like. So it's super easy for this huge AI system to put a red flag on something that looks weird. If I get, let's say, a malicious attachment, and it sees that's reported, that means all of the other, let's say, Windows Defender systems get that same information, and they know now, they know that file, let's say a brand new nasty file, should now be removed or blocked. And also, when it comes to let's say malicious logins, again, if I'm in the US logging and working away, and 10 minutes later, Azure shows my login from China, that's just physically impossible. So the systems know that, and can, depending again on your organization policies, let's say in that example, it could say, okay, this looks suspicious, so let's prompt for another MFA. Or it could say, okay, let's suspend the account, or let's shut the account down, depending on what you want, because you can set up sort of no-go areas zone-wise. Let's say you don't want anyone to log in from country X for whatever reason. So yeah, it has incredible rich properties with that.
Well, yeah, it's unfortunate commentary, but a realistic view. The data tells us that breaches will happen,
Yes,
and
there's no question.
we need to do our best to try to minimize and mitigate that risk.
It's all about the detection and the remediation. That's all it is. Because we always try to be one step behind the hackers or the bad actors. And that's always going to be that way. So everybody, every organization, every person will have some sort of breach or malicious activity. And still, the number one is email attachments, and that's still in the metrics for this year from the independent studies.
Exactly. And the data also tells us that small and medium-sized enterprise is hit disproportionately as well.
Now, why do you think that? Again,
Well,
just think through a common sense perspective.
Yes. Yeah, well, we assume that the Fortune 50 probably has extremely large investment in IT security
right. And what's the number one industry that is targeted constantly? Do you know that one? So the number one industry that I'm giving you a pop quiz now. The number one industry is actually real estate. And if you think about it, that makes perfect sense. You have all these independent brokers using all these, their own devices, because that industry is a huge independent element to it. You've got your sort of Keller Williams and your CBREs, stuff like that. But also, those people deal with huge transactions of money, huge amounts. When you think about escrow and all that. And it was, interesting. I was at one of the large ones last year, and this was on a Monday, and that weekend they had their first breach, and someone had extracted $250,000 from an escrow transfer. So that kickoff was quite pertinent.
Yeah, indeed. And Steve, we also have a couple of questions too that we'd like to get to. So we have one question about how are the documents automatically classified?
Okay. So this is depending on the product and license. So, and again, I'm not a licensing expert. That's a whole other area. But say, for example, let's say, for example, Office or M365 E3 versus E5. So E3, it's a slightly less user license, will allow you to, set up the labels and apply the labels. But then if you've got the E5, which is a bit fancier, it will do the application part of it for you automatically. So meaning in E3, you have to manually set the labels, like when you're creating a document, but E5 will do that for you automatically. So there's just subtle differences, and it depends on the product and the area of the security suite, how that works.
And that may have partially answered one of our other questions as well. Yep. But if you'd like to, maybe address some of the other differences between, E3 and E5. I know Microsoft doesn't always make it easy because I know all the options.
I have enough knowledge on the licensing to be dangerous, but it's quite a challenging discussion, and that really needs to happen with your licensing rep, because depending on what plan you're on or what connection you have with Microsoft, it does vary a little bit. But as a general rule is the wrong term, but as a sort of a general statement, you usually can do things with an E3. And then E5 makes it automatic, or gives you the automation behind whatever that process is. And that is a very, very diluted generalization, if you like. But that sort of gives you a sort of, you get all the bells and whistles, of course, with the E5, which includes a lot of the automation. Let's say a lot of the real-time risk. Let's say if you talked about conditional access, and it's going to rate me as a login depending on my behavior. It's going to do that automatically. And if I start, let's say, going to areas of the business and start pulling large amounts of, let's say, contact data, because I'm going to quit tomorrow, it's going to flag that and stop it. So little things like that. But there's a lot of elements with the E5s that definitely are worth taking seriously and looking at.
Yeah, it is. It can be a complex area, and we'd certainly be happy in a separate conversation to go into some of the ins and outs of that, because there are steps between E3 and E5 as well, where you can purchase security and compliance functionality on more of an a la carte type system as well.
Right, and just get what you need, which is wonderful.
And Steve, another question is, would you be able to maybe touch on some of the highlights of the roadmap as well? Anything to note?
Let's see. Now, the roadmap, as in the roadmap for Microsoft Information Protection?
Yeah, or any particular highlights.
Yeah. Let's see. I'll pick a couple. Microsoft Endpoint DLP, which is in preview at the moment. So this DLP used to be part of Azure Information Protection, and now it's going to be it's taken out in a separate stack, which again goes back to your great statement, so you could do a la carte with it, hopefully with licensing. And data loss prevention is the system that watches, let's say, watches what you type in a sense. So it's going to look for, and again, depending on the policies you set, let's say it's going to look for personal information, like if I start typing in a social security number or credit card number or DMV, something like that. And that could be in an email, it can be in a Word or Excel document. It's going to pick that up, and depending on your policies, it's either going to warn or it's going to stop it. And let's see, that's a good one. So they're separating that out, and they're going to make that richer, it looks like. And cloud app security, there's a huge lot of development there. But I think one of the biggest things is the advanced threat protection, which is really, really coming a long way. And I've just been working with the product team at the moment, doing dives into that new set of systems. What else is a good highlight? Yeah, I think definitely is a lot of refinement, for want of a better term, when it comes to the monitoring, reporting pieces, as you saw with some of the screen grabs I got there. It's just beautiful. It's super intuitive, very easy to use, and they're just improving on that all the time. But there's a heck of a lot going with the enterprise roadmap for these things. So it's like, gosh, when you ask me, I'm like trying to think, there's so many to choose from.
Yeah, fair enough. Are there any other questions that we might be able to address? I know we're running up at the bottom of the hour here.
Got everything, yeah. But I mean, definitely, if you have any, if anybody wants a bit more detail or more clarification around the questions, just shoot us a mail. That's no worries at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Please reach out, anytime, and we'd be happy to have a separate, more customized discussion. And in fact, if there's interest too, we also offer a more customized security briefing that would be specific to individual organizations at no cost. And there's also a number of potential engagements that we discuss, such as more in-depth workshops, proofs of concept, etc., that you may be able to leverage your Microsoft funding sources for as well.
Yeah, especially around the security assessment. Sorry to interrupt there. That's a great place to start, because you as the organization, of course, information is power when it comes to understanding how these systems work and how you can leverage them to the maximum effect for your organization. So these security assessments are a great thing to start off with, because we'll go through your tenant and go through all of the configuration settings and work with you to do an enterprise road mapping for your organization, from there.
Absolutely. And now that we are just beginning of Microsoft's fiscal year too, a lot of those funding sources have been refreshed. And if you can get, some critical information about your security stance, eliminated through one of those security assessments at no or at smaller cost to your organization, all the better. So.
Right. And, Microsoft investing billions and billions every year just in security, because they understand it's an incredibly critical area and topic.
Yeah, certainly, and that's been reflected in the Gartner assessments of Microsoft security products as well. So.
Oh, yeah. They've literally, slingshotted past the competition now with this.
Absolutely. Well, if there's no further questions, we definitely appreciate everyone joining us today. And thanks, Steve, for a great presentation. We will be publishing the recording of today's talk and letting everyone know how to find it. And I think with that, we'll end here, but please have a great day, and we'll look forward to connecting with some of you again to talk further.
And don't open that suspicious email.
That's right.
Have a good one.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.